I don't know. Let's kick this off with the first question. When did you first use AI for programming?
I used it like pretty early on. I think my first really eye-opening experience with it was using GPT three, like Chat GPT when it first came out, um, and just having it do like really basic stuff. I think I just defined like geometry, like a geometry library in it, sort of just for fun though. But and I was blown away that I could even do those really basic things like, defining a rectangle and a point and a circle and an area function and all these things
Mm.
that it was doing at the time. Things have gotten a lot more sophisticated since that moment, but that was kind of like this, yeah, mind blowing moment for me.
Was it mind blowing or were you, nah?
It was mind blowing. Yeah, I don't understand the general like hate and skepticism toward AI that so many programmers have. Like I remember in college, I studied natural language processing, and I worked for my professor who was right after school. He was like the head of SRI doing like classic AI, Jerry Hobbs. And I remember how fascinated I was with the idea of like, what is meaning? What is language? How does it work? And studying these like combinatorial, categorical grammar mechanisms where it was like, we defined grammar as this directional lambda calculus formalism. And, I was really curious and fascinated by all of that, but also came away frustrated because at the time it was like a language model was, the dumbest thing ever. It was like, based on like the frequency of tokens or something, and you couldn't get anything out of it. So just the idea that I could sit there and in English ask it to do anything and have it do anything at all, to me is mind blowing right then and there. Like, that's amazing. That's a freaking miracle that I never would have anticipated being good. So why everybody's not blown away by that fact that this exists in our world is beyond me. I just don't get it. Like, okay, yeah. Anyway, it pisses me off kind of that people are like
Sounds like it.
so close-minded about it. Yeah, like, yeah, you drove a Lamborghini into my driveway, but like I don't like the color or something. It's like just this fixation on negativity and what's wrong and what it can't do, instead of being amazed and, yeah, blown away by what it can. And I guess that's just a personality difference between me and people that are like that. Of like, I am always looking at the glass half full, and I'm always looking at what's exciting. Now I get that, like, I never bought a single NFT, right? Just to be clear. So like, I get that in technology, we have these like hype cycles, and it can get a little exhausting, and you're just like rolling your eyes at the latest hype cycle, and people in your Twitter timeline in all capital letters, right? Talking about this changes everything, game changing. But I think in this case, like, it's actually pretty freaking amazing that we have this technology. Okay, I'll
Funny
stop
that
ranting.
you mentioned natural language processing because I come from the other side of the fence. I studied philosophy and I studied philosophy of language. And then when the LLM, like when ChatGPT came out, everybody was saying, it doesn't understand. And I was sitting there thinking, what does understanding even mean? Like, how do you understand things? What is meaning? So yeah, I also was on the other side of the fence and thinking it's not that easy, and this is super fascinating. But yeah, Max,
Yeah.
Antonio, where did you also ChatGPT or something else?
Yeah, I think it was ChatGPT for me right after. I don't know. I think Nathan prompted, us to use it. I think. I don't know. Like, yeah, and for me, like, it's I'm not an AI skeptic or anything, and I'm amazed that like I to be clear, like, yeah, I kind of use AI for also non-coding tasks. Like I go there like from time to time to be like stuff that I'm not I don't know. But yeah, I've never had like an eye-opening experience or like or like I don't know. It was never like because like I think one thing I struggle a lot with AI is what is it that I do every day, right? Like I write code every day, for multiple hours a day, and I write it in Rust and on this pretty complex code base. And so like my first use case for it is like, okay, I want to try to use it in this code base. And like, so I think, I don't know, every time I try to do that, like there's always some friction. But one thing that I really like, especially when it comes to generating, complex pieces of code, one thing that I think it really shines in, and like I tend to use it like more in, is like, basically there are certain patterns, right, where like you can't really express with regular expressions, or just like command D or whatever, like that. Yeah, AI is really good at it. You can just be like, okay, I want to apply this refactoring like to these these 5 functions, and I can just explain it in a way that I couldn't explain it with any tool like regex or what I said. And so that's where I thought, I don't know, there's a lot of interesting potential even right now. So I don't know if that answers the question.
But it sounds like there was a bit of a disappointment moment where you go, I want to use it in our code base.
Yeah, and to me, like, I don't know whether the line is like, this thing hasn't seen enough Rust. Maybe that's a problem. There's also like a problem of like how we integrate with it, probably, right? Like where we don't give it enough context. Okay. Like I think the problem of just like feeding it the right, like one thing that I've started to learn only recently is just like, crafting that context is, I don't know, essential. Like, and you really need to kind of express, I don't know, the machine really needs to understand what you're trying to do, and especially in a complex code base. And like, in a code base, you have like, I don't know, in your brain, like there's like 50 references, like just, loaded in your brain already, but like the machine can't know that. Like it just, how could it? And so, just like, part of it, I think, part of my disappointment is also like just the integration with the AI, not the tooling per se, but just like, I don't know.
It's our failing. We're not there yet.
The comparison between using Copilot in the Zed code base, which I still use sometimes, but is sort of not, I wouldn't call a game changer for me. But then I switch over to some JavaScript script that is for like, I don't know, it's a single script where all the context is there. Its job is to minimize a randomized test failure by reducing the steps or something. And it needs to read a bunch of files and invoke some shell commands. I'm amazed when I make that context switch from like, complex code base where the knowledge is spread across many files to like a single file where the context is all there. Copilot just, knocks it out of the park in the latter context. And so if we could get it to behave like that in our day-to-day work when we're working on hundreds of thousands of line code base, there's a lot of potential there.
That's what I noticed in our code base, that when I would use the chat assistant, I often thought, if you could only see the inlay hints. Like if you could see the types, then then you wouldn't give me this answer. But
and that's again our failing to, like, the most successful times I've ever had with it are times when I'm synthesizing together things that are already in the model's training data. Like I love that mode. Like a lot of GPUI2's render I wrote just in the assistant panel purely from like, I need a render that integrates with the Metal APIs. It's written in Rust, and it wasn't perfect, but like it was way faster than me, configuring all these graphics pipelines and stuff. Like it's not something I've done a ton. I did it in our first take, but like, so just this, like, I love just like distilling something I need like out of the latent space of one of these models. Right? Where I'm providing like a few parameters and then, but it's mostly in the weights, but I'm guiding what's in the weights to sort of give me like this Stack Overflow on acid type thing, like where the knowledge is out there. I just need it in a certain shape and I want to guide it. So like I was playing with Claude this weekend in the bath, right? So I was just like, I literally wrote an entire file index that used like lock-free maps to store file paths, interpreted all the FS events coming out of like the FS events API. It did everything asynchronously. You know, it wrote randomized tests for it, had a fake file system implementation. And I was in the bath, right, on my phone. I didn't have a single moment where I was writing a curly brace. And like, now I never ran the thing that it produced, but like I reviewed it with my eyes. And while it may had a few issues here or there, like it was a very legit implementation that this thing wrote of something that took Antonio Max and I days and days of continuous investment to work on. Now, my knowledge of like having solved it before helped me guide it. But I don't know, there's almost some way in which like, yeah, it changes the scale of what you can do quickly. And then sometimes it just falls flat on its face for the simplest thing. Yeah. Anyway.
So, ChatGPT came out November 2020, right? When 2022, sorry. 2022.
Yeah.
Yes, 2022, when we all should have bought NVIDIA stock. Did you, since then, kind of adjust to AI and kind of adjust how you use it? For example, people who use Copilot, they say they adjust to it and they kind of leave some comments where they kind of want to guide Copilot, and they leave like little things. So in the next like little breadcrumbs or whatever, and the next time they get completions. Did any of you ever get into the whole prompt engineering thing and like, this is the code, this is that snippet of code, give me a chain of thought here and then do this? Or was it just, I don't know, gradually just drop, like, did you adjust to the AI or did you reduce when you use it? You know what I mean? Where, it can't do this, so I'm not going to try to get better at this. Or did you invest effort in prompt engineering and things like that?
I don't know quite how to answer that. I don't really use Copilot for what it's worth. I find it annoying. It's like in my face.
Yeah.
I never was into like running tests automatically either on save. Like I always just want to, I don't know. So I prefer to interact with the AI more in a chat modality. So I'm really looking forward to like the time we're about to invest, like getting more into that context window out of Zed. So yeah, I've never done that, like I just find like Copilot to be kind of dumb. I don't know. I like because they have to be able to invoke it on every keystroke and every time you know, they're having to use like a dumber model. And so I guess I just prefer more using a smarter model, but being more deliberate in how I'm using it. But I don't feel like I'm not like married to that perspective. I think maybe some UX tweaks on Copilot could change my relationship. But I don't know. I guess I've been willing to sort of use it and even have my interaction with it be slower or less effective sometimes, in the name of investing and learning how to use it. And and the time it saved me on certain really hard things, like writing a procedural macro to enumerate all the Tailwind classes for GPUI, like it kind of taught me how to write proc macros because I didn't know how. Anyway.
Yeah, I guess what I'm thinking about is, you know, exactly a year ago, I was at a conference and I was meeting, you know, programmer friends, and we were all talking about ChatGPT. And some of them were saying, it doesn't know anything. Like, I just tried this, and it doesn't know anything. And the queries or the prompts they used, they looked like the prompts people used 20 years ago with Google. You know, where you still had this keyword search, but people would type in, where can I get a hot dog? And that's not how, back then, it didn't work like this.
Right.
And a friend of mine, he said, you know what I use it for? I use it like an assistant. I use it like an intern. Basically, he's debugging a thing and he wants like a little example program to reproduce the bug. So he says to the AI, can you write me a little HTTP server that doesn't set a connection timeout or something like this, right? Because he knows what the shortcomings are. And I'm feeling that, you know, a lot of us had this over the last year or year and a half, where we kind of started to get a feel for where the shortcomings are and adjust our use to it. So I was just curious, like how, if you had any of those moments.
I have one in my like day-to-day life. I use ChatGPT a lot instead of Google, and I've learned to say like, now don't hedge this by saying it depends. I'm aware. Just tell me, like, give me an answer, so that the ChatGPT voice, Juniper or whatever, doesn't say like, there are many possible, responses to this. But I think I have a lot to learn about what to do in the programming world still. We're sort of, I don't know, I think there's probably a lot of knowledge out there that I just haven't like adopted into my workflow yet for prompting the assistant.
Yeah, I think I have the advantage of just being not as good of a raw programmer as Max or Antonio. Like a lot of times when I'm pairing, take more of a like navigator role in the interaction. And so I just reach for it more because like I'm just not as fast at cranking out code. And so I think it's less frustrating to me, its limitations sometimes, because like, yeah, I don't know. Or I'm putting myself in your guys' heads about it, anyway.
Yeah. So when did you decide we have to add this to Zed? Was it the hype, being swept up in the hype, everybody asking for it, or was there a specific thing or time where you said, no, I need this in the editor, like I don't want to go to the browser anymore, or something like that?
I mean, for me, there's Copilot and then there's the assistant, and so Copilot, everybody asked for it, and I was like, oh, I want to see what it's like to work with this, but then I ended up not using it a lot. But for the other one, it was just like I was using GPT-4 and they were rate limiting me, and so then I was going into the SDK or like into the playground and like writing text in a freaking web browser, and I'm just like, this is driving me crazy. I want to write text in Zed. So it's that's what the assistant is right now. It's kind of pretty bare bones. It's like an API. It's like an OpenAI API request editor almost that isn't annoying to use, like from a text editing perspective. And that's kind of where things are at right now, which isn't where they need to stay. Like, I think we have a lot of work to do on it. But that's the thought process. I don't know. You guys have, yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else have thoughts on it? No. I kind of want to go into the weeds, and the question is, when you use inline assist in Zed, right, and context for whoever's watching or listening or reading, you can select text in Zed. You can then hit Control Return, and you send a message along with the selected text and some more context to the AI, and you can ask it, change the return type of this or whatever, reorder this or use a macro, something like this. And what then happens is, when a request comes back from the AI, you can see it type the text or change it, and you can change it word by word. It doesn't look like it's just shoving the text into the buffer. So I'm kind of interested, what happens when the LLM request comes back and says, here's a snippet of code, what happens?
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically, we implemented a custom version of the Needleman-Wunsch algorithm, which is basically there's several algorithms for like fuzzy finding, and they all stem from like this dynamic programming algorithm, which is essentially finding like the lowest cost path from point A, the origin, which is like where two strings kind of start, and the end, which is where both strings end. Yeah. And so we're kind of doing this like diff, this streaming diff, because like typically diff is like a problem where, it's this lossy function that, where you need to have like both pieces of text like entirely. But the problem is that the AI kind of streams those, the response like chunk by chunk. And so, we don't want to wait for the entire response to come back before diffing. And so, yeah, we kind of have this like slightly modified version of, Needleman-Wunsch, where like we try to favor insertions and like deletions, and like we kind of look ahead a little bit, we kind of have a different cost function, I guess, that lets us kind of, produce these streaming edits. It's a pretty fun project.
So did you build this specifically for the AI? I assume there was some underlying collaboration, no? Like it uses stuff from collaboration?
No, yeah. Like what we tried at first actually was to kind of have the AI use function calling to kind of give us the edits, like as opposed to, kind of asking for, a response and like the AI just spitting it out like, top to bottom. The initial attempt was like, okay, just give us the precise edits that, you want us to apply. But what we found out pretty early on was that like it wasn't working very reliably. Like, I don't know, it was kind of tricky to have it kind of produce precise locations, right? Like it's really good at kind of, understanding what you're trying to do as a whole, right? But like it's very hard to kind of have it say, okay, at point 3, row 3, column 2, I want to delete, 5 characters and insert, these other 6 characters. So yeah, like we went back to like the drawing board and we were like, okay, what is this good at? It's good at spitting out text, right? Like just rewrite what you wanted. And so yeah, that's where I think it was Nathan's idea to do it.
And Antonio's algorithmic chops actually making it happen. Yeah.
How it's pretty reliable, right?
Thanks.
Sometimes it overdraws, like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not always reliable for me, like, and I think that has to do with our prompting maybe, or like there's a lot of exploration to do here where I'll ask it to like write the documentation for a function and it'll like rewrite the function. That drives me crazy.
Yeah, the prompting, sure, but the actual text insertion, every time I see these words slide up, I'm like, what's going on here? How, I've worked with LLMs. How do they do this? So how long did it take to implement this? I'm curious.
Half a day.
Nope.
Yeah, I remember, a day, something like that.
But to be fair, like we'd already really explored and used the Needleman Wunsch for the like path matching, and that took a little more time. Like, wrapping our brains around it, and I think more of it stuck for you. Let's put it that way. It's like, traversing that dynamic programming matrix still kind of boggles my mind a little. Yeah.
Half a day. You could have said a week just to make me feel.
A week. No.
That's crazy. Okay, so right now in Zed we have inline assist, what we just talked about, right? And it has 2 modes, right? It has the transformation mode and it has the generation mode. I don't know how they differ under the hood, but I noticed this, right? One
pretty
is
much the same.
Yeah, it's pretty much you insert text. And the other thing is you send text along that has to be.
That's right.
So we have inline assist. We have the chat assistant, which you can use to just write Markdown, and you have multiple models. What's next? What's on the roadmap?
I mean, a big piece is just getting more context into what the assistant sees, like kind of transitioning it from an API client for, just making a language model request to starting to pull in, Kyle, who's been contracting with us, has a branch where we're like pulling in the current file, but obviously like more mechanisms for pulling in not only the current file, but maybe all the open files. You can kind of, if you want to, dial in and opt in or out, but then also like doing tool calling where I can be talking to the assistant and having it like help me craft my context, if that makes sense. So having it interact with the language server, but then also like using TreeSitter to sort of traverse dependencies of files that we're pulling in so that we make sure that we have all this in the context window. Of course, context sizes have gone up a lot, which makes this all a lot easier because we can be more greedy in terms of what we're pulling in. So that's like a big dimension, is like populating that context window more intelligently, but then also giving the assistant like tool calls that it can have to like write a command in the terminal. I don't know if I want to give it the ability to hit enter, but like at least write it in and stage it and shift my focus over there so that I can run something, and so I could get help with whatever random bash incantation I might want to run. So having the assistant escape that little box and reach out and interact with other parts of the editor. So that's like all really low-hanging fruit, I think, that we need to pick. That's what's next for me. And then we're also like experimenting with, like integrating with alternative completion providers, like for the Copilot style experience. We'll see where that goes. It's still kind of early days there.
I'm excited about another sort of dimension of the feature set where, right now like all the stuff we were just been talking about, the assistant's very local. Like you select a block of code and its output is like directed into that location. But being able to, just like code actions in Zed, I can say, inline this function into all callers, and I get a multi-buffer opened up that says, I changed here, I changed here, I changed here. Do you want to save this or undo it? And it's just like, I can go look at what it did. I want to be able to say, extract a struct out of this that isn't in this crate, that's in a subcrate, and depend on it in all these usages of this crate, so they don't have to depend on all this other stuff. And then have it go like, here, I changed your cargo toml, I created a crate, I changed this, I did these like sort of more complex transformations to various pieces of code in your code base. You want to save this or undo it? I think that's going to be a really powerful way of, like letting me have it do more stuff while keeping control. I think the multi-buffer is a good way to that we present to the user right now. Like, do you want to apply all these transformations that I just made?
And speaking of multi-buffer, like another really low-hanging fruit thing is like invoking the model in parallel on multiple selections. Like when I pull up a multi-buffer full of compile errors that are all basically the same stupid manipulation that I needed to do, like it'd be great to just apply an LLM prompt to like every single one of those errors in parallel.
Do you think that, I guess there's the low-hanging fruits are everywhere, where you could add AI to every text input basically, right? And add autocomplete or generation or whatsoever. But there was an example last week. I talked with somebody who basically wanted to use an LLM in the project search input, where you could use the LLM to generate regex for you, right?
That's cool.
That's cool, but I'm also thinking at the same time, well, wouldn't actually be the better step be to have like a proper keyword search instead of having the LLM translate to a regex? Like how about you have like a search where you can type in, how do we use display points or whatever? How do you think about that? Like, do you, like basically the possibility of being trapped in a local maximum?
Like, meaning, like how much of the current like programming tool paradigm, like regex search, do we want to keep, or do we say that we don't even need that feature anymore? We encapsulate the regexes within the
something
UI
like that
is
where
natural language based.
Yes, like I think, a year ago everybody was adding AI to every field, and now obviously things change and people go, this is not a good use case for that, or this is not that, and now you're saying, I wanted to also have access to files. I don't want I don't want drag and drop into the chat assistant thing so I can manually add 28 files. I want an automated step. So I'm like, how do you think about that? What do you see like the next big thing to reach, like the big milestone?
Well, like I guess I have different perspectives on, like there's a couple different things I want to respond to that with. One is like we experimented with semantic search over the summer. And like the initial thing that we generated all these embeddings with OpenAI's embedding API, which is designed for text and prose, I think less than code is my understanding, but maybe people can comment on the YouTube video and tell me I'm wrong. But like, so I don't know how good embedding models are in general for code, but what I did find is like this initial experiment that we ran that was literally just like you would start typing your query and we would just show you the files or like the file and line number of like the places. And I was just using that a ton for like navigation. That it was like just really useful to be able to mash keys. It was like better than Fuzzy Finder and better than the Command T, which is like the symbol search on the language server, because at least with Rust Analyzer on our code base, like that can be really slow. And so I used it as kind of this just like quick, convenient navigation tool. But then I was sort of not super involved. We pivoted that prototype modal experience into like a feature of our search. And then I just stopped using it because the friction of using that was too high, and like the quality of the results that we were getting, at least then, like wasn't really high enough. So, but I want to get back into that of like restoring that modal fuzzy navigation experience of just like using semantics to like quickly jump to different areas, but it's not like a search result, not quite. It's more like this quick thing. So that's one thing. But the other thing I want to say is like I'm skeptical, I guess, and of course I was skeptical of AI in general until I was proven wrong. So I want to be careful to be humble about the possibilities of what can be done. But in general, like where I'm at right now is I really want to still see what is going on. Like I don't want a lot of shit like happening behind the scenes on my behalf where it's writing a regex and then running it, because like I don't have enough confidence that like that's gonna work well. And so until I get that confidence, I like the idea of there being like this very visible hybrid experience of like the AI is helping me use the algorithmic traditional tools. So the idea of an AI writing a regex or writing a code mod or writing a tree sitter query that runs across the code base, like I'm sure we could train it, or it may already know how to write the perfect tree sitter query to pull up exactly the syntactic nodes I'm looking for and like select them maybe. Anyway, so I think even OpenAI, right? Like they have the code interpreter, right? Like they're not trying to get the LLM to add numbers. They just shell out to Python. And so I think like giving the AI access to these more algorithmic traditional tools is like where I want to go, but then seeing it do that as well.
Do you have any thoughts on the context windows, as in, to give you a prompt, pun intended, but when you have a large context window, you would think all of the problems are solved, right? Just shove the whole code base in. I don't know, what's the biggest, Gemini has the biggest context window, or Claude 3, I don't know, but you can put a lot of stuff.
Gemini.
Yeah, but then you also have to upload a lot of code, and you also have, it takes a while longer till the response comes back. Like, any thoughts on this trade-off between context size and latency?
I'm still wrapping my brain around, what causes the additional latency when the context size grows larger. Like my understanding of a transformer is not, in my mental model of a transformer, I don't understand why it takes longer, but I can see like practically that it does. So just, I guess, revealing my ignorance here. But to me, it does seem like giving it everything is like a recipe for maybe giving it too much and confusing it. Although my understanding is like that's also improving. Like they're getting less confused now by noise, and like the needle in the haystack problem. Like it's, what I saw from Gemini, I'm still kind of waiting to get my API access. But what I saw was that it's very good at kind of plucking out details that matter among the sea of garbage. So I don't know. That wasn't a very coherent thought, other than it seems to me that like I'm skeptical that it seems to me that we need to think about how to curate that context for a while longer. And like the times when I've interacted with models and been most successful has been either when I'm, again, like drawing from the weights, the latent space of that model with very little needed in the context window because the problem I'm solving is sort of out there in the ether. Or I really set it up with the specific things that it needs to be successful. But to be fair, like I think we have a lot to learn in this space.
I guess I asked because you said you used the fuzzy search, the AI, juice.
Semantic search.
Semantic search. There you go. You used that when you had it within reach, but once it, there was a little bit more friction to it, you stopped using it. And I noticed this with these large context windows. I already get impatient when I have to wait for ChatGPT sometimes, and I'm like, come on, skip the intro, give me the good stuff. And when you have large context windows, I wonder whether I would rather skip asking, when I know that the answer is going to take 20 seconds to come back or 10 seconds or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think the higher the latency, the more I'm going to expect out of what it responds with.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just having a great time in the bath, like waiting for, while I waited for Claude to respond, I just like took a deep breath and felt the warm water on my body, and then by the time it responded, I'm just like reading its output.
I think you should redo this with the control group that also codes in the bath, but with the other one. Maybe the results are the same. It sounds like a fantastic bath. Let me ask some controversial questions. So when I said I'm going to join Zed, people asked me, oh, a text editor, isn't that, 2 years ago? Now with AI, do we even still have to write code? What do you think about that? Do you think we will still type programming language syntax into Zed in 5 years, or do you think that the face or the input, how we program, will fundamentally change?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I tweeted out, it's kind of ironic that as soon as AI can write me a code editor, I won't need a code editor. But as of yet, it's not yet possible to sit down and say, build me a code editor written in Rust with GPU accelerated graphics. I don't know. I don't think AI is there yet. Now, maybe that's the only product complex enough. The only thing that AI can't build is a code editor. But I'm skeptical right now. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe Ray Kurzweil is right, and we're all just going to be uploading our brains into the cloud and I just don't know. All I know is what is true right now, and things are changing fast. But what seems true right now is, at the very least, I'm going to want supervisory access, like that Devin demo. It's to me, a potential outcome is editing code ends up feeling for a while like that Devin demo, but with an amazing UX for having a human programmer involved in that loop, guiding that process, so that we're not just spamming an LLM with brute force attempts at fixing it, but sort of there's this feedback loop of the LLM taking action, the human being involved to kind of correct that or guide that. So it becomes this human LLM collaboration, but the human is still involved. If that ends up not being true, I guess we don't need a code editor anymore. I don't know how far away that is, if it's ever going to be here. They've been telling me for a long, long time that I'm going to be riding around in these self-driving taxis, and I've done it a couple times. Although I will say, the taxi refused to park where we actually were in San Francisco, so we got to walk in pouring rain while we went to the legal place for it to pick us up. So again, one of those my mind is freaking blown that a car is automatically driving to me, picking me up, and driving me somewhere else. And at the same time, I'm a little annoyed that I'm walking through the rain right now to a place where it went. I probably could have anyway. So it's just feels like the same thing happens with LLMs, right? So anyway, who knows what's going to happen? But for the moment, I like creating software. I don't need to type the code out myself, but I do feel like I'd like to be involved more than just sitting down to a Google search box and being build me a code editor. It's seems far away. Yeah.
What do you think, Max Antonio?
I'm bullish on code still being a thing for quite a while longer. I think it's it goes back to what Nathan said about the AI kind of expands the set of things that you can build on, in a shorter amount of time. It makes it easier to explore a bigger space of ideas because it's cheaper. It's just I think there will be code that no one's job is to write anymore, so that are boring anyway. But I think it's just going to make it possible to have more code because it's cheaper to maintain it, it's cheaper to create it, rewrite it if we want a new version. There'll be all kinds of things where before it would have been right now, banks aren't able to deliver good websites. it's hard to bank. But I think there may be a day where a bank could have a good website and and like just all kinds of things. There'll be software that was like, for whatever reason, is infeasible to deliver right now still, and is now feasible finally to deliver. And I think there's going to be code, and I'm still going to want to look at it sometimes. The bank code is going to be like with us.
Yeah, it's an incredible commentary on the power of human incentives and the corruption of the banking system that a bank having a good website is the day before we achieve AGI. But anyway, sorry, Antonio, you wanted to weigh in.
I don't know. Yeah. If you look at Twitter right now, like every post is like, AGI is coming out like next month. And so I don't know. I don't really know. Like the honest answer for me is that I don't know. Like it's possible. And I don't know. That's one part that annoys me about AI is just like how opaque some of these things are. It's like, I don't know. In the past, like in technology in general, it's like, oh, there's this hard thing, right? I don't know. At least I could, I don't know, sit there and just be like, try to understand it and like even, create it, right? With AI, it's like, unless, if you want to do something like GPT or, Claude, you have to spend like millions of dollars. And it's like, I don't know, that part, I'm like, I don't love that. And that's where, my doubts come from, because it's very possible that like, engineers, researchers or these companies are, right there with AGI, right there with like a super, human, intelligence. But yeah, I don't know. Is it true? How much of it is hype? How much of it? I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah.
One question that I'm wondering about it, I would love your thoughts on is, I use ChatGPT a lot to, when I use like the chores of programming, like just CSS stuff or some JavaScript, or I used it to generate a Python script for me to talk to the Google API, and it saved me a full day of headaches and trying to find out where do I put the OAuth token and whatnot. But then, lower level programming, say async, Rust, whatever, you can see how it starts to break down. You can see that this other thing seems relatively easy for the AI, and this other thing, something happens there. And what I'm wondering is that a question of scale? Like, did it just see more JavaScript? Did it see more HTML because it scraped the whole internet versus systems Rust code?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, or the same question, basically?
I think solving problems that have been solved a lot of times that are have some slight tweak is it's a great fact that I think like that it works that way. That those are boring things because they've been solved a lot of times, and I think the LLM is great at knocking those out. And some of the stuff that we do, which has been solved, I'm not going to say we're doing things that have never been done before every day, but a lot of the stuff we're doing day to day is not like been solved that many times in the world, and it's fun. That's why I like doing it. And so I'm like, I'm not that upset that the LLM can't like totally do it for me. But when I do stuff that is super standard, I love that the LLM can just complete it, just solve it. Yeah.
I want the LLM to be able to do as much as it possibly can for me. But yeah, I do think it's that it hasn't seen a lot of Rust. I mean, I've talked to people in the space that have just stated that. Like, they were excited, like, oh, you're open sourcing Zed? I'm excited to get more training data in Rust. And I'm like, me too, other than like, hopefully, competitors just sit down and say, build me a fast code editor, and then it's already learned how to do that, and all this work comes to nothing. I don't know. But also, like, if that were true, ultimately, like, I'm just excited about advancing the state of human progress. So, like, if the thing I'm working on, like, ends up being irrelevant, like, maybe I should go work on something else. I mean, that'd be disappointing from, like, I would like to be successful, or whatever that means from a human perspective, but also just getting my ego out of it. Anyway, I don't know how I got on that tangent, but I think like I really think that like writing Python with it, which like I don't want to write, but I need because I want to look at histograms of frame times and compare them. Thank you. I had no interest in writing that, and it did a great job, and I'm good. Yeah.
There's also another meta point, which I guess we didn't really discuss, is like, okay, the AI can, even in a world where it can generate, a code editor, there's still like, at some point you have to decide that, how do you want this feature to work? And, I guess the AI could help you with that, but there's, the controlling part of it that I think, I don't know, I think, I guess there'll be a human kind of like directing that process and understanding like what the requirements are and like what are you even trying to do, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe that also gets wiped out by AGI at some point, but I don't know. Code at the end of the day is just an expression of
ideas.
And then the knowledge that, that's within a company or within, a group of individuals. I mean, I don't know if, we have time for it, but just like, I'm excited about AI in the context of collaboration. I think that would be like a really good angle for Zed as a, collaboration platform.
What do you mean?
Just like, I don't know, like we've talked about, querying the tree sitter for like, a certain function or, the language server for references. And that's some context you can give the AI. But what about all the conversations that happened? Like, what about, back to our previous talk, previous interview, like, again, like if it's true that code is, a distilled version of all the conversations that have taken place, well, that's great context for the AI to help you write that code. So yeah.
And we can capture that context with like voice to text models.
Yeah.
Or do multimodal shit. I mean, that, like, my real dream is, like, to just create an AI simulation of Max or Antonio, GP Tony, And because, like, I love coding with them because it lets me kind of float along at a higher level of abstraction a lot of times. I don't know, maybe I'm just being lazy. I should be typing more, but, like, sometimes I feel like when I'm typing, I get in the way or whatever. Like, and so I just love pairing and I love being that navigator and being engaged. So a multimodal model that could like talk to me and write code as it's talking and hear what I'm saying. And I can also get in there and type here and there. That'd be amazing. That's not the same thing as collaboration though. Like, but it would learn from watching us collaborate. That's my main thing.
You could train the AI based on all the edits that Antonio has done over the last year or something.
With the auditory stream.
Right. Why did those edits, took place? Like, what was the reasoning? Why, is it better to do things this way and not that way? What's the, kind of internal knowledge that, implicit knowledge that we have and it's not written anywhere even, right? It's just like, we have it just because of shared context. Yeah, just sharing that context with the AI. Yeah.
And like, before we started or when we started Zed, like we always had this idea of like, wouldn't it be cool to just put my cursor on a character and be like, show me that character being written. And that was like this idea that there was all this conversation and context tied to all this code and we could store it and make it easily accessible. But even that mode is like, it's a lot of shit to comb through, right? Like, and so having a tool that can just be really good at distilling that down and presenting it in an intelligent way, that's amazing. That's a really exciting development to your point for collaboration of like bringing all this data that we could potentially capture but aren't really yet to our fingertips in a new way.
One last question, look into the future, and you touched on this, Antonio. I notice what I love about programming, or why I love the internet, is that Andy Warhol quote of Coca-Cola is the same whether the president drinks it or you drink it. Like, there's no premium Coca-Cola. Everybody gets the same. And programming to me is, I can write code online with the best of the world, and it looks the same on GitHub. Like, it's just my avatar and their avatar. It's a level playing field. I can put my website up, and it's also torstenball.com next to this other thing. Like there's no exclusive club. And what I keep thinking about is that all you ever had to have was a computer, and now it's a Raspberry Pi. But now with AI and LLMs, suddenly things start become really expensive. You know, like to play in the AI game, you suddenly need a lot of money or GPUs or something like that. Do you think about that at all? Do you see the shift, or do you think, oh, it's always been the case? If you wanted to have like a multi-million user scalable web service, you had to have money, or do you think there might be some fundamental shift?
I think a part of it might also just be, at this day and age, like the cost of that hardware is, maybe high because, we're not there yet technologically, right? Like, it's like, yeah, running, I don't have the historical references, but like, yeah, I'm sure, things have gotten a lot cheaper in CPU land, right? Because there's so many of them. So, I could see a world where like in the future, things start getting cheaper just because like they become more commodity.
Yeah, think about the late 70s, right? Like Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie like writing Unix on a teletype printer hooked to a DEC PDP-11 that was like up to the ceiling of my room in here, right? Yeah. And talk about the democracy of access to compute. Like, It wasn't always the case. It just seemed like we were in an era where like compute ceased to be the limiting factor for like a really long time on innovation, but like maybe that's true again now, and who knows where it's going.
Nice. That's beautiful. Nice. All right, and Max, anything to add?
I agree. I think the costs are going to come down for LLMs, and it's just going to be, yeah, I don't like that it's so expensive right now, and that this like only a few companies control it, but I feel like it's kind of headed in the right direction where there's all kinds of innovations on the smaller LLMs and different providers of LLMs, and I think someone said it's going to become more of a commodity, and I hope that's the case. It seems like very doable. That it's like a pretty. At the end of the day, now that we understand the technology, it seems like it's a pretty straightforward service to provide of this transformer model that is trained on the internet or whatever. Not to downplay how amazing the engineering is, but I feel like it's got to be, the costs have got to come down and it become competitive.
Yeah.
And like I don't engineer my own microchips, right? Like no, So it's like there's still part of computing that is not accessible to me. I guess that's hardware, but like, I write against that API, right? I compile to the instruction set of the CPU that was produced in this crazy expensive fab in Taiwan or whatever. And so like, I guess I'm okay with the idea that there may be some piece of computing that's still sort of like made in a fab for massive capital outlay, and now I have access to it. But I don't get to really participate in its details as much myself. I don't know, it may be that way for a while or maybe forever. Because like, yeah, when they become democratized and the open source models are available, like is OpenAI or Claude or Anthropic going to have yet an even more powerful model that has had more compute thrown at it? Like, are we ever going to reach a point where we saturate that? I don't know. Yeah.
But they say one shouldn't bet on technology prices staying the same, right? It's historically they've always come down.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.